Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about how this latest data strongly hints at big cross-generation titles for Nintendo Switch 2. The likes of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and maybe even Pokémon Legends Z-A, I think based off what we're looking at here, seem even more likely to be getting enhanced versions on Switch 2. Even though there's already backwards compatibility, I'm not talking about having the exact same versions playable on Switch 2, but actually improved versions. So why exactly does his latest bit of info have me further leaning in this direction? That's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time Switch 2 launches later this year, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and hit that notification bell. So firstly, shoutouts to Cardinal H on Twitter, because they create a whole bunch of awesome mockups having to do with Nintendo, including the Switch 2, and this image in particular having to do with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and there being a Switch 2 version, I have found especially interesting, which is why I may end up using this as the base for today's thumbnail, so shoutouts to them, their account will be linked in the description below. But I think this is an interesting starting point for the conversation. I've believed for some time that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to have a cross-generation version for Switch 2. And my primary reasoning behind this is that this is a game that Nintendo's been investing many resources into for years. This was initially announced in 2017, and it is an ambitious Nintendo game that looks especially impressive, and we are so late into the generation. It reminds us of what the Nintendo has done in the past with two different Zelda games, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild. I think Nintendo would want to maximize potential success here and have Prime 4 available on both platforms, and no, not just through backwards compatibility. Even Twilight Princess was in a similar scenario where, yeah, you could technically play the GameCube version on your new Nintendo Wii, but they still made a specific version for the Nintendo Wii that had different functionality. I imagine that if I'm right here, there will be a version of Prime 4 that will look better and maybe even have some additional functionality. For example, those mouse controls that we've now seen essentially confirmed from the reveal trailer. This would be perfect for first-person shooters, which guess what? That's exactly what Metroid Prime 4 is. So at least mouse functionality makes sense for Prime 4, but I'm expecting a bit more than that. But then also there's been a lot of conversation about Pokémon Legends Z-A having a cross-generation version. And I haven't been as committed to this idea until recently. I understand that Game Freak doesn't have much of a history of having enhanced versions or exclusive versions for next-generation platforms immediately, but I think this is a different beast, and more recently, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, the Terror Leaker said this regarding Pokémon Legends Z-A. Unlike what we said earlier, we recently found a proof that while there is not a single build for it, Ikaku, which is a codename for Legends Z-A, might get a Switch 2 version. Take with a grain of salt, but while storing the Gen 10 stuff outside of the usual Ikaku folders, we could find something named exactly like the Gaia ounce-related repositories. Gaia is the codename for a Generation 10 of Pokemon that will be coming out presumably next year, and Ounce is a codename for Switch 2. But for Ikaku, named Super for both, so Super Ikaku, Super Gaia. We've already talked about how there's already been a leaked version of Generation 10 Super Gaia, but now they're finding evidence of Super Ikaku, suggesting that there's going to be some sort of Switch 2 version for Pokémon Legends Z-A, or at least that they've worked on it. Will it see the light of day? That remains to be seen, but the point is there's some evidence out there now. And so the two big new Nintendo games that are slated for 2025 are Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Pokémon Legends Z-A, but now we know Switch 2 is coming out this year, and based off how things have been going, it seems like it's coming out pretty soon. Last week I talked about how I believe it might be coming out as soon as May 15th, which may be surprising to some of you, but I have a whole video explaining why I think that's the case. And even if it's not May 15th, if it happens sometime in May or June, that's still really soon. And with us not having that much info on Legends Z or Prime 4 yet, it seems like most likely these games are coming out when Switch 2 will already be out, which strengthens the notion that maybe they might want to have a Switch 2 version. But now on to the latest data. So Nintendo has put out their earnings release for Q3 of their current fiscal year. Basically, we just got the holiday sales data for 2024, and this information I think is very telling for where Nintendo is headed right now. So here Nintendo has updated their sales data. We see that the Nintendo Switch as of December 31st, 2024 has sold over 150 million hardware units worldwide, and nearly 1.36 billion software units as well. The Switch has done extremely well, and as pointed out by Pierre here, whose account will also be linked in the description below, the Switch is currently pacing to outsell the PS2. As Pierre says, it's tracking 21.64 million units ahead of the PS2 when you align their launches, but currently as things stand, the Switch is 9.14 million units behind the PS2. So can the Nintendo Switch become the best-selling console of all time? According to this chart right here, where things are trending, the answer is absolutely yes. However, we see the Nintendo's current forecast has gone down again. They are currently forecasting for this entire fiscal year, once we get to March 31st of 2025, that they will have only sold, in a 12-month span, 11 million hardware units and 150 million software units. You'll see here that their previous forecast from last quarter was 12.5 versus 160. After the holidays, their strongest sales period of the year, they still think they need to lower their forecast, and they did. But this wasn't even the initial forecast here. Their initial forecast was 13.5 million units for this fiscal year and 165 million software units. So they've had to drop 15 million in software units and 2.5 million hardware units, and there's still no guarantee they'll even hit this forecast. They've had to drop their forecast twice already, which means there may be an even higher likelihood it could happen again. Or rather, they will fail to meet their forecast again by the end of this final quarter, March 31st, 2025. And so you might be wondering, how is this information relevant to the conversation? It's relevant to the conversation because the Switch is clearly trending downwards. Sales potential of the console is trending downwards. Not just hardware, but software. People like to make the argument that software still sells really well on the Switch, and it does. Comparatively, considering how late it is into the generation, but software sales are not as strong as they once were. And so when you look at big brand new games like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Pokémon Legends Z-A, do you really want to put them in a situation where they're not going to have the most potential success? These were expensive projects. Game Freak did not come out with a game in 2024. They are waiting until 2025 to come out with this game, where they would sell less if it was only made for the Nintendo Switch. As things continue, sales potential diminishes. Taking a look at this chart here from Pierre showing the sales of the different Mario Party games over time, we see the Jamboree came out to a very strong start for the holidays. Last quarter is actually the best start to any Mario Party ever, which you might think is contradictory to my entire point. But look at what happened with the two prior Mario Party games. The initial Mario Party sold 5.3 million, and then it had incredible lifetime sales afterwards. Mario Party Superstars, on the other hand, had an even stronger start, but its lifetime sales are far less than Super Mario Party. Now you'll say, of course, it came out beforehand. Yes, but is there any chance Superstars catches up to Super Mario Party? Probably not. It is not trending in the direction of ever catching up to Super Mario Party. And so we look here, yes, Jamboree has sold stronger to start, but the legs are likely not going to be as great as Super Mario Party. In other words, Jamboree may not even pass Superstars' lifetime, which suggests that there is a trend that even with Nintendo's most popular release of the year, it's not going to surpass prior entries. It's trending downwards in terms of sales potential. But here's another example. Let's look at 2D Zelda. Link's Awakening came off to an incredibly strong start, 3.13 million, and then lifetime sold an additional 3.5, so it sold extremely well. It's close to selling 7 million lifetime. That's incredible for a 2D Zelda game. As you see here, it's performed better than prior entries. But then you look at Echoes of Wisdom, which is a brand new Zelda game. Link's Awakening was a remake, and Echoes of Wisdom came out to a lesser start than Link's Awakening, and its lifetime sales, which of course are not as large, admittedly, because it's only been out for so long. But the point is, Echoes of Wisdom isn't pacing to pass Link's Awakening either. And this was a remake. This is a brand new title, totally. Typically, brand new titles have more sales potential than remakes. And on top of that, there was more competition for Link's Awakening when it came out. In this period of time, back in 2019, it came out around Fire Emblem Three Houses, Luigi's Mansion 3, Pokémon Sword and Shield. There were some huge releases that sold extremely well during that time, and so did Link's Awakening. Echoes of Wisdom didn't have as much competition, at least on the Switch specifically, and yet here it is, still performing worse than a prior entry that was just a remake. And so my ultimate point here, even looking at new titles, the sales potential is lesser. It may still be pretty good, but it's lesser, and as time progresses, it becomes even less impactful. So when Legends Z-A and Prime 4 come out later this year, they're going to have even less chances for potential success compared to 2024 titles. And if you also factor that there's a next generation console for Nintendo coming out this year, where there are going to be next generation games, that's going to perhaps even decrease their chances even more so of seeing success if there are only Switch 1 versions. And so when looking at the sales data, it does show that while the Switch is performing admirably considering how long it's been out there, it continues to trend downwards, and Nintendo is continually dropping their forecast for how well it's going to do. And with Switch 2 on the way, that's going to even more so exacerbate this downward trend for Switch 1 once it comes out. So with two big, exciting, ambitious titles coming out this year in Prime 4 and Legends Z-A, the way to best maximize their potential success is by also having cross-generation versions. And in the case of Legends Z-A, we now have some evidence for it from the Terra leaks. And in the case of Prime 4, in the past we've discussed how we have seen some job hirings that show that Retro Studios has put together talent that has knowledge of ray tracing, which isn't possible on Switch 1, but maybe they might be acquiring that talent so they can work on ray tracing for a Switch 2 version of Prime 4. There might be that, and as I also mentioned earlier in this video, we now see the MouseCon support, the MouseCon functionality, which is very fitting for a first-person game like Prime 4. They may add that functionality very similar to how the Zelda team added the pointer controls to Twilight Princess for its version on Nintendo Wii back in the day. So as time progresses, I only become continually more confident in Prime 4 having a cross-generation version for Switch 2, and now I'm also feeling the same about Legends Z-A as well. And maybe neither of these titles end up being launch titles, because we do see that Mario Kart is the first game Nintendo's showing off for Switch 2, so maybe that's a launch title. But we are in a different era where having enhanced versions of games on your next generation platform is pretty commonplace. Look at what Sony has done with a variety of their titles. So Nintendo providing enhanced treatment for Legends Z-A and Prime 4, I think should be expected. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.